You're listening to Switched On Australia, the podcast that tracks the opportunities and challenges of electrifying everything, everywhere. Switched On is brought to you by the publishers of Renew Economy, Australia's best informed, most read website focusing on the green energy transition, and is supported by Boundless Earth. Boundless Earth uses philanthropy, investment and direct advocacy to help Australia become a global force in a decarbonised world. Hello and welcome to Switched On Australia. I'm Anne Delaney. Thanks for joining me. And I'd like to acknowledge that today I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Guringai Nation in Sydney. Rooftop solar, home batteries and smart technology are often held up as the heroes of Australia's clean energy transition because they help households cut power bills and slash emissions. But what if the way we're paying for that transition is quietly shifting more of the cost onto the people least able to afford it? A draft review from the Australian Energy Market Commission on pricing has sparked controversy recently by suggesting changes to network pricing that critics fear could increase fixed charges. These are the part of your electricity bill you pay no matter how little power you use. My guest today says the backlash is understandable, but he also thinks the debate may be exposing a deeper problem in Australia's electricity system. Gavin Dufty is the National Director of Energy Policy and Research at the St Vincent de Paul Society, and he's spent years tracking what households actually pay for electricity through Vinnies Tariff Tracker project. He argues that the current system is already producing deep inequities, rewarding households with solar, batteries, and the time, confidence and knowledge to navigate the market, while shifting costs onto renters, low-income households, and those of us who simply don't have the means to participate. It's an argument not without its detractors, I admit, because it challenges one of the most widely accepted ideas in the energy transition, that more rooftop solar is automatically a win for everyone. Gavin Dufty, thanks so much for joining the Switched On podcast today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Gavin, I just want you to give me a little bit of background about the Tariff Tracker project that you guys have been running for some years now. When and why did you start it? What were you hoping to achieve?
Well, back in the last century, well, I've always been in energy policy. So I've always tracked tariffs back through time, back from about 1993, 94. And we realised about 15, 16 years ago, as deregulation was coming and privatisation in some jurisdictions and changing in the energy market was there, we thought it'd be a really good idea to start to track gas and electricity prices that people pay through their retail bill and just see what the energy deregulation privatisation would look like for households and what products and services might come of it. Yeah, so that was the whole point, just to work out what would the reforms look like, what did they do, and what was the consumer outcome. So it was more about getting up some longitudinal data sets as we went on this great journey.
Yeah. So if you had to sum up this latest report on specifically electricity tariffs, what would that be?
I think there's three high-level things that are starting to come to, and we've called the report, we are at a tipping point in our view. So the first one is we've got smart meter penetration up to about 60% on average across the NEM. Some jurisdictions in Victoria are up around 100%, others are down below 50. But what that means is with all those computers on the front of everybody's house, basically, the data that's being collected from households is actually lifting up where the costs are in the system and who's doing what and who's putting stuff in and who's taking stuff out. So basically there's a lot more visibility, and that means the intermediaries, whether that be wholesale markets, retail markets, distributors, whoever they are, can see who's putting costs in the system and not. And that starts to push cost pressures around the system. The second one is we were looking at about, are retailers, what are they doing with network pricing? There's been a whole lot of change within network pricing, poles and wires in our street. And what are they doing with that? How are they passing that through? Some are, and the punchline is some are passing basically the ratio between fixed and variable straight through. Others aren't. They're loading more up into the variable charge, and others are loading it more up into the fixed charge. So,
And just to clarify, what you're talking about here is whether or not they're passing on the network tariffs at the retailers, whether or not the retailers are passing on those network tariffs, and in what form, isn't it? That's what you're
yeah,
talking about.
yes. Not only that, but it's how they're managing the other parts of the cost stack. So it's not only network price design, but it's also wholesale market price.
Yep.
How much do they, wear that risk in, say, a financial product, which would be much more into the fixed component, or how much are they wearing exposure to the wholesale market through consumption pricing, which you pass on to consumers, and also about how they allocate green schemes and all those other things, which are also pushed through generally on consumption charges. So we're sort of looking about, well, how retailers are managing risk and what does that look like? And is that different in different jurisdictions? Is that different with different customer classes based on the type of retail product they're on or not? And then the other one that I suppose the other thing that I find of particular interest is we do cost stacks at the end. So we look at each distribution zone across the NEM, excluding WA and NT, and we look at, how are costs allocated for those that are on standing offers, those that are on market offers, and those that are on solar offers. And I'm a solar household, so I have to declare interest there. And about how the costs are allocated within or across the community based on the type of engagement you have within the market and the type of technology you have on your home.
So, who is Australia's electricity tariff system really working for right now, and who is it failing most clearly?
I'd like to frame the question differently rather than winners and losers. It depends. I think it depends on when you're standing.
Mhm.
And we are in an energy transition, and my organisation is concerned about equity. So, at a high level, I would say for those without CERD, kit,
Consumer energy resources. So we're
resources
talking
and
solar, we're talking batteries, we're
batteries,
talking chargers.
we're talking that sort of stuff. We're talking people that might have smart kit that actually interacts within. So it doesn't have to be new technologies. They could just have smart home devices that
Mm.
sort of can be a little bit more dynamic and engage through, companies like Amber and those sorts of ones. So if we park them aside for a tick, I suppose winners and losers is a bad way to put at it. What the market does is it reallocates costs to where costs are. Where are the costs? User pays. That's what markets do, and that's not such a bad thing because that's where public policy comes in through complementary measures or protections or whatever. So from my point of view, you'd want to be able to push through, well, where the costs are, and people should pay those costs. And as a society, we should then determine about what sort of provisions, supports, subsidies, whatever you want to call it, do we have in there to smooth the transition. Within the market, those that are engaged, I'm pretty well engaged. We're doing quite well. Um, Everything's a little bit more costly. We're building two systems. It's going to cost more, but I tend to pay less because I'm a little bit more engaged because I do shop around a bit than those that are disengaged.
Mm.
So those that are disengaged don't have the wherewithal or have got busy lives or couldn't be bothered tend to actually pay higher prices than those that are engaged. So you've got a market failure thing there.
Is that the biggest divide that you've
Oh, no.
identified? Is
No,
it
no. No, that's just one of the divides. Okay, so there's the engagement in the market divide, those that are active and those that aren't. It's there, and of course, I'm talking generalizations.
sure.
Then you've got another divide, which is those that have smart kit like me, and those that don't.
Mm.
So what's happening? I'm not the energy system isn't recovering the full costs that I put into the system. And there's a whole lot of reasons for that. It's because network pricing, it's about retail pricing, it's about default pricing, obligations and the nature of those obligations. So I'm free riding a little bit. The challenge there is the more I don't pay my way as a solar household, the more those costs get shifted across to the non-solar household. So the non-solar household that's quite active in the market might be able to mitigate that cost shift that I've put onto them as a solar household. And then what happens is that those that are not engaged in the household in the market end up picking up the costs that the solar households and the solar battery households and those other ones with kit behind their house, behind their meter, they end up picking up more. So you start to get this cost reallocation within the community, and that is a problem.
I'm interested in how you've framed that. You've framed it in terms of those who have solar access and the kit, the smart kit, free riding and cost
Yeah, they are.
shifting. Hang on 1 minute, but surely they have actually invested in this transition. They've
No,
spent
no, no,
thousands
no.
of dollars in this transition.
They have been underwritten by society for those investments. I have been subsidised, and there are charges on other people's consumption that have underwritten my investment on my home, which has improved my capital value. I am now wealthier for those investments that have been paid by the renter next door. It is a system that rolls back into the tax and transfer system as well.
Isn't it a case, though, of finding better ways for the renters, for the people without the kit, without the smart kit, to actually join the transition rather than trying to reshift the costs back onto people who have actually invested?
No, all you no, 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 what happens then is you just shove more costs down to a smaller and smaller group of people that can't actually manage the costs. So, we've got about, what, 30 odd % penetration of smart meters. Solar, I should say.
Solar. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, we whack in some more solar or whack in solar batteries. They actually then don't pay a whole lot of costs, even though they might use the network once or twice a year when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow and all that sort of stuff, and they use the network. So they don't pay annual access charges. They just pay when they use it on kilowatts. And what happens is the more and more of those people there, because the networks are on revenue caps under the regulatory framework, those fixed costs get shifted to other people. And the other people that they're getting shifted to tend to be low wealth people. That is, people that don't own their own homes. That is an intergenerational equity issue. I am old. I own my own home. I'm being subsidised to put new technology on my home by other people through increases in their charges of consumption, which tends to be younger people that are out there in the rental market. That's a structural problem we have here.
But if we look at it even more high level, Gavin, if we have more people on solar, rooftop solar, doesn't that necessarily mean that we don't therefore need such a big build out in terms of the poles and
No,
wires?
no, 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 that's not true either. So the more solar that gets shoved into the system, the more we end up constraining those injections into the system. That's why they're putting the emergency backstop out there, because solar only we're awash with stuff between 10 and 3. There's too much of it. What happens then is, because rooftop solar is not, it's not dispatched, it goes out there undispatched, it floods the market. What happens then is all that large scale solar and wind that's generating at the same time has to be switched off, or we pay negative prices. Now, everybody thinks, oh, the industry's paying negative prices. Somebody's paying for those negative prices, other consumers. So, there's no magic money go round here. The system needs everybody to be orchestrated. We don't too much is bad because the physics of the system says, oh, the lights have got to go off. So what we're looking for is diversity.
But what about demand management? Encouraging people to use power at different times. Mechanisms to be able to do that. Obviously, some people can't do that. They can't. Not everybody can put the washing machine on at lunchtime. But with more smart kit, with more batteries rolled out, for instance, that will help people to do that sort of thing, won't it?
Well, no, we're talking technology again. Let's not talk about technology. So I sort of agree with what you're saying. So if you have a look at everything's got to be balanced, supply and demand. It's a perfect thing. So I'm a solar household. It's like the eHarmony of energy. That's what I'm looking for. So swipe right. We're all looking to swipe right. So every household that's generating want to swipe right and find a load from households that aren't generating that can consume it.
Mm.
And so what we've tended to focus on in the energy industry is new kit and subsidising new kit on rooftops. And this is where the smart meter rollout in other jurisdictions other than Victoria is really interesting because the smart meter rollout generally came with solar. We didn't give the smart meters to households with load only and then develop products that says, hey, why don't you switch on your hot water? Why don't you switch on pool pumps? Why don't you switch on all your traditional appliances if you can in the middle of the day?
Mm.
And then I found a market for solar. And as you know, at the moment, solar feed-in tariffs are 2 parts of zero.
Yeah.
That's because there's no market. So we're looking at it to try, let's build out those renters that don't have batteries and they don't have solar. How can we offer them and how can we enable them to participate in the energy market with the kit that they've got? And that can be done through smart appliances, home energy management systems, the internet of everything, which comes back to the
But
federal
not
government.
smart kit. Is that what you're saying? But not smart kit?
Smart kit.
Well, you're talking about, energy efficient appliances, but are you talking
No,
about
I'm
solar and
not. No,
batteries?
no, I'm not talking about energy efficiency. I'm talking internet-enabled appliances.
Okay.
Yeah, load is load. A battery can consume and it can inject. A hot water system can consume. It's storing energy just
Mm.
as much and it's just as legitimately as a battery is. It this this obsession with particular technologies is not helpful. We should be technology agnostic and provide the framework so we get this beautiful swipe right going on all the time.
So, you're talking about, okay, the people, the non-solar owners, the non-smart kit owners. So, how else will we do the rebalancing? You're suggesting that we need to be charging people with solar and batteries more?
No, we should be level playing field. It's called the people that put the costs in the system need to pay for their costs. So if you've got a solar battery and you're sitting there once a year and you monster the network for 20 kilowatts or whatever it is, you actually need to pay for 20 kilowatts availability. If you don't pay for it, somebody else is paying for it. But what you get for that access to that is access to a market, access to other value. Like all the people that are on Amber are
Mm.
making a mozza with their kits.
Well,
But
some
they
are.
need
Yeah,
but
some
they
are.
ne yeah, some are, but yeah, and others choose not to. But the point is the optionality to have access to the network, the poles and wires in the street, you pay an access charge. We do it for transport. I pay registration annually. I do 1,000 kilometres a year. I pay rego, I pay my insurance as the government requires me to. It's not and we all do that. So we have the insurance and we have the access to the roads. Poles and wires are no different. I cannot understand why a solar battery household, based on its utilisation or the optionality to have out there, or a solar household, should have a different pricing regime than anybody else. And this is a legacy issue because we didn't have that kit wasn't there and we didn't have the metering stock on the front of people's houses to actually do that.
So I'm part of a household that has the smart kit, and just recently, we're able to get a cheaper home battery attached, and we got some more solar attached.
Yep.
We're not drawing from the grid anymore.
Okay,
Um,
so you can disconnect then and not pay grid charges.
Potentially, but as
Yeah.
we know, we want people to stay on the grid.
Well, as long as they pay their costs, yeah.
But I am paying costs, Gavin,
No,
on
no, no, no,
my
yeah,
network
no,
charges. We're
no,
paying
you are
$1,000 a year for those
you
network charges. I
you
mean, are you
you are
suggesting that we need to pay more?
I'm suggesting that you need to pay the costs that you incur when you're using the network. Now, if you put new kit on your home, you m might get a reduction because you don't actually use it as much as you did. But it's not
Okay,
about
sorry,
you, that
let's just clarify that. So what you're suggesting is that, if I'm not using the grid very much, that my network charges will go down?
if you don't use if you don't use the network over an annual period, so it's got to be over a year, and you don't use it, and this is where capacity charging or demand charging that says you pay for the availability of the pipe in the street.
Is this going to solve the issue of getting low income and people without the smart kit a better deal? Because
Yes, it will.
if there's a whole lot of people like me who've decided,
Yeah,
well, I've got my battery, I've got my solar, I don't want to be drawing from the grid. So if there's
it
a whole
will.
lot of people like me, so it doesn't seem to be solving the problem that you're
No, it
talking about.
does. It does because we know through tariff structure statements from the distribution networks that, and I can say in Victoria, you are looking as a cross subsidy of about, I don't know, about $60 per annum that non-solar households are paying because solar households aren't paying their charges. So you will help low-income households, young people renting and all that, because under a revenue cap, the revenue starts to get collected from people that are underpaying, and that is good public policy.
So, just looking at the AEMC's recent draft pricing review, they've made a couple of recommendations which a lot of people are very concerned about because they think it's going to, pave the way for higher network charges.
No, that's not what they're doing. What they're talking about is about how do you rebalance network pricing, and remember, they're on a revenue cap. So whatever they get is set. It's about cost allocations to make sure that they recover costs equitably across the people that use the network.
Mm.
And if we don't do anything about it, the more people that have the privilege, like you and me, to put solar in and solar batteries, if we don't get those pricing frameworks right, younger people, poor people in terms of wealth, because they're younger, will end up carrying the can. And that is not good for an energy transition at all.
Mm.
So there's another way to look at this. It says we need to look at the value we get as these privileged people with the new kit
Mm.
that we can extract by paying what we should pay, because that allows us access to the wholesale market, new products and services that I've quite privileged to be offered, which the people in rental markets that are in the rental that don't have the kit don't have access to.
Okay, we'll take a short break and we'll be back in a minute.
G'day, Alex Carey here, proud ambassador for GoodWe. The GoodWe ESA 3060 all-in-one commercial solution is available now from GoodWe wholesalers. With a massive 50 kilowatt hours of the battery eligible for the federal rebate, it's the perfect solution for small businesses. The commercial energy storage range from GoodWe is growing, with more models launching soon. Visit goodwe.com.au for more information or contact the local GoodWe team.
My guest today on Switched On is Gavin Dufty, the National Director of Energy Policy and Research at the St Vincent de Paul Society. And we're talking about how the way the energy transition is currently being paid for risks deepening inequities for renters and low-income households.
Can I just go back to the tariff tracker project that you've got? Because,
Yep.
I mean, looking at the network charges that you have included there, the part of the bill that consumers really can't do much about, and, this is the cost we've been talking about for the
What? No,
networks.
no, no, no. To be clear, it's one of the costs. Green schemes. So the green schemes, SRES, LSRETs, Victorian energy efficiency upgrades, all that sort of stuff are charged on consumption. So I've been subsidised to stick, and you've been subsidised by society to put stuff on our roof. We should be paying that back one way or another, I'd like to think. But because they're allocated on consumption, and you can see it in the cost stack there, I then never pay it back. Somebody else does that doesn't have that kit on their roof, which is not ideal.
Okay, so look, I just want to drill down a little bit more onto this, because what your tariff tracker project has identified is that these network charges increasingly make up a larger part of our bills. This is the part of the bill that it doesn't matter whether or not we use a lot or not much. It doesn't matter if we're energy efficient. It doesn't matter if we've got solar or
No,
batteries on
no,
it.
correct. And I go back to the car analogy. It doesn't matter how big or small my car is. We all pay rego, and we all pay our common insurance to use the shared infrastructure, and it is shared infrastructure.
How much though should those networks be charging for
Which that is a different question about network regulatory reform, not about the cost allocation form.
Well, how much should they be passing on? Because obviously, from what your report has suggested, is that it's completely different in different states. So it's
Yeah.
not it's not a case of actually reflecting the cost to the network, surely.
No,
If
no,
that's
no, you've made a statement there that I don't necessarily agree with. So if you're in South Australia, for example, you'll find they've got higher network charges. They are a big state
yeah,
with not many people, and on a revenue cap, you have to share the costs amongst the users, so there's less people to share a higher cost.
yes.
So you'll find, say, in City Power Network in Victoria, where there's lots of people all crammed in the inner city, all those costs get to be shared amongst a lot more,
Mm.
and everywhere in between. So again, it comes back to that shared infrastructure and monopolies and how you allocate costs in monopolies. And that's one of the challenges that we've got moving forward in the energy transition is people get to avoid those shared costs.
Can we also just backtrack a little bit with, where the prices are going up most? Can you just summarize where electricity prices are and how much they've gone up in this last report that you've done?
I- It depends. Look, generally as a whole, everything's gone up everywhere. Some marginally, some, over 10%. But again, that cost increase depends about whether you're engaged with the market, whether you're not engaged with the market. It has a lot of sort of ifs and buts around it. So, but costs are going up, which you'd expect. We're building two systems. We're in an energy transition. Some people have the ability to mitigate or avoid some of those prices, and some people have the ability to avoid all of them.
The longer term price rises really are stark, aren't they? Since 2009, since you've been doing
Yeah.
this tracker, electricity prices
Yeah.
on average across Australia have nearly doubled, haven't they?
Certainly have. And that makes sense because we're rebuilding a new system. But when you look at, and that's a cost stack, so it's everything in there. You've got to build out networks. We're electrifying everything. We've got, green schemes, and all of those things end up in those cost stacks, which means, who's under the cost for underwriting my solar and your solar battery and all that are in there. You've got, the whole underwriting of, large scale renewable generation. It's in there. There's just a lot of cost.
So you don't believe that the industry in any way or shape or form is price gouging?
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it is the data says that costs are going up. Now, of course, people will be taking us for a ride somewhere. Some of that would be gouging because markets aren't efficient. That's fine. Some of that would be cost shifting. Now, whether that's gouging or not, that's a different question, which we spoke about before. And some of that would be about people's views about what is prudent and efficient and appropriate regulation for where regulation deals with costs. But at the end of the day, we do need to provide a return to people, whether that be government, and government owns a lot of these assets, or private equity, because you need that money to underwrite the new investment if we're going to go to net zero and we're going to get there. You've got to have a return somewhere to pay for the infrastructure to get us to where we all want to get to. So what's gouging? Don't know. I'm sure it's there. Where? I don't know. I'm just Gavin at the Vinnies. But there will be higher costs, and we do need to create a return, because without a return, governments will have to go somewhere else and cut social welfare or whatever to do it.
Everyone is, focused on electricity prices at the moment, and everybody is trying to do their best to try and reduce their electricity bills, including solar customers. But solar customer bills are also rising everywhere, I believe.
No, certainly are.
And I'm presuming that's because the feed-in tariffs have shrunk.
Correct.
Does that challenge the idea that rooftop solar is a guaranteed escape from high energy costs?
Yeah, no, but I think everybody was sold a silly proposition. I've got rooftop solar. I bought it and put it on my roof because the capital improved value. I've had $15,000 to my house. My capital improved value is $15,000. I don't really have a bill. That's okay, and that's cool. But I'm still winning elsewhere. I'm wealthier because of it all.
Mm.
I have more optionality. So the value that it gives me, nobody talks about. I have more optionality. I have more products and services within the market. I have different retail products I can go to. And I can bolt on stuff and have less bill shock. So in social services where I come from a social policy point of view, I have way more agency and ability to manage a transition than people without this kit. So, and all our solar and solar battery households should understand that, because kids out there, 25, 28, don't have this.
Mm. What about the federal government's proposal for what they're calling the solar sharers offer, where everybody on a default offer will be provided with at least 3 hours of free electricity? Do you think that this, addresses this point that you're calling, the cost shifting that solar owners are putting onto other people? Doesn't
Well, no, can we just clarify there? The cost shifting that's happened, that is happening because of consumer energy resources and the changing nature of technology. I don't want to demonize solar households in particular. We've got a framework and a foundation that doesn't deal with the fast change and pace of technology. It's really easy to get tribal about this stuff, and we shouldn't be getting tribal. We should be talking about an energy
I
future.
kind of wonder, though, whether or not the way you have been talking about cost shifting, it is very tribal. Whereas, what we should be focusing on is bringing all consumers on this energy transition, and the way through is to actually change the retail industries, to change the network industry, and to change what the regulations are, and to push government.
And I agree.
And it does seem though that, if we focus on this cost shifting, that,
Well,
solar
and
people who are trying to do the right thing, Gavin, if
Well,
we
no,
if
no,
we
I'm
focus
one
on
of them.
that.
I'm
I know
one
you
of
are.
them. And
I know you are.
and do the
Just one sec.
right thing,
Just one
and we should
sec.
be doing the right thing socially as well. And we should pay our way, because we are being subsidized by the rest of the community to have the privilege we have, and we need to pay our way.
Yeah, everybody needs to pay their way, but at the
Correct.
same time, this energy industry at all levels is making a mozza. I mean, that they are screwing all the consumers, aren't they?
Well, no, they're not. They happens to be the government as well. They are the energy industry just as much as private equity. So it's really easy to have villains, but the villain is government, which is us. Yeah, who owns all the energy assets in Queensland? Who owns it in the ACT? Most of it. Who owns 50% at least in New South Wales? Like, it's it's there.
Regardless of whether or not it's private or it's government, my focus is on, I suppose, ensuring that consumers, whether or not you have the smart kit or you don't have the smart kit, whether or not you're a renter, whether or not you're a homeowner, etc., that we have to bring everybody on this journey. And if you want to divide, it's consumers versus industry and government, so to speak.
But with a distributed energy, consumer energy resources future, as I said before, we all need each other. You can have as much solar on your roof as you want, and if it's all flooding in the middle of the day and nobody's consuming it, it will get switched off because the system will collapse and we'll have a blackout. We'll have black system. So we all need each other here. And this is where, coming back to the AEMC question, what we're trying to do there, well, what I'm trying to do in that space is let's get the foundations right for a new future where consumers actually get to share the love and we all get to swipe right. It will take time. We need smart appliances for those people in high rises that will never be able to have batteries and solar, but they have got assets and resources that are important to me as a solar household. So how do we give them agency to participate? How do we get subsidies into them? Because they've never had subsidies and they can't get them.
Yes.
But if we do that, putting a subsidy on consumption, it's not actually quite right, because all it means is people like you and me don't actually end up paying it. But if we're going to bring everybody along, we all need to help each other. And if you want to get the frameworks right, so cost reflectivity, I think, is a great place to start. Now, complementary measures become really important. So the complementary measures about social equity and environment, they're the complementary measures. So how do we do and how do we fund complementary measures in a way that don't unpick good foundations or unpick the fabric, for want of a better word? So we haven't spoken about concessions. There's a whole lot of energy concessions out there that are designed to support people with low incomes or vulnerable spaces. I'd say, are they appropriate? Are they targeted? Because you can't expect an energy system to walk, talk, chew gum and do equity and environment and be efficient. So this is where the complementary measures and how they work is important.
What do you mean by that?
Well, are the concessions targeted right? And is the amount of concession...
Are they? Are the concessions that we have?
No. My personal view is in Victoria, concessions are consumption-based. So the more consumption you have, the higher the concession, because they're percentage-based.
Yes.
Basically, the more you use, the more concession you get. That makes sense, particularly with a whole lot of changing technology behind the meter, where, say, aged pensioners might be able to install solar battery. They won't have an energy bill, basically, so they probably don't need concession. But a single mum in public housing with shitty appliances that's using a lot, we know that they tend to overconsume, will get proportionally more concession to help them. That's a good outcome. Now, in other jurisdictions, everybody, regardless of how much energy you use, gets a flat rate. That is not well designed. And green schemes, another design issue, in my view, is basically green schemes. The way the levies are raised to pay for the subsidies that you and I have is based on consumption.
So, Gavin, would you support having a scheme, pretty much what Rewiring Australia are recommending, and that would be having subsidies and rebates for efficient electrical appliances? So, I might put a battery on, but somebody in a rental home might put in something else. They might have a heater which is much more energy efficient, for instance, which will lower their bills.
That's a public policy question, and I, in principle, believe with the public policy question. The point is, how do you pay it? Do you pay for it through consolidated revenue, which is progressive, Or do you just load it up on consumption charges on bills? Or conversely, if you change the way we allocate things, does everybody pay a little bit rather than those that consume more pay for the transition more? Uh, So it's who pays and how is the question. It's not to, that's the conundrum. It's not do it. It's about how is it funded.
That is a question largely for government. As a representative of an NGO like St Vinnies, surely you must have an opinion
Oh,
about
we'd say,
whether or
yeah,
not this is actually going to improve the lives of
no,
the people you champion.
we'd say if you want to improve the thermal performance, structural performance of houses, we'd agree with that. We have a public policy position that should be done through consolidated revenue. Unfortunately, at the moment, because of the energy system and the federated model, a
Mm,
lot of basically it resides with the states. The states don't have the same taxing
yes.
arrangements that the feds do. And because of that, they end up shoehorning stuff into consumption on energy bills, which just drives up costs for those people that can't afford it. And that's regressive.
Gavin, a final question. We're running out of time. What do you think would be the main thing that would help the constituents that you represent to lower their bills and to be part of this energy transition?
For me, it's about moving from a goods market where we are selling kilowatts and megajoules to a services market where we are wheeling services because everybody has service, and that's where we swipe right. And that's where the AEMC's price review comes in. That's where Nelson's wholesale market review comes in. So we move from kilowatts and megajoules to what you do with insurance or internet or phone plans. Basically, you have these annual certainty in pricing. For me, it might be $1,200 a year. And if I hand over control of my inverter to somebody, I'll get a discount of $200 a year
Mm,
for that flexibility. Conversely, for people that don't have the kit that you and I have, they just want hot water on demand. They want heating and cooling on demand. They want just lights on when they need it. And so they would, through smart appliances, they'd be able to participate in a services market too.
mm.
And so then you sort of match, oh, if I could switch on your storage hot water system in the middle of the day, that suits me as a solar household. That gives the hot water on demand when people need it. And so that's where we need to get to, in my mind. Underpinning that would be changing the protections, consumer protections in the background. So moving from the current one about you've got protections based on billing and collection and hardship programs to one that's based on a duty of care.
Mm.
So if you're wheeling services, whether that's injections or load, that you have a duty of care not to let that hot water system fall below 65 degrees if it's a storage hot water system, because we don't want to give people Legionella. If you're coordinating or orchestrating air cons on and off, or heating on and off, you want to make sure that there's a duty of care that it doesn't fall below a certain area, a certain temperature.
Mm.
That is good for households because we all get to participate. It's also good for the energy system, which means we don't have to overbuild big stuff or little stuff. And it's great, and it's just great for everybody because we've sort of used the tech and the smart that we've got there, and we've skipped ourselves into the 21st century in a way that sort of gets us to net zero as quick as we can, with everybody having an opportunity and having agency to be a participant in that.
Lots to think about, Gavin. Thank you so much for joining the Switched On podcast.
It's a pleasure.
And Gavin Dufty is the National Director of Energy Policy and Research at the St Vincent de Paul Society. And the question we've really been discussing today, if you get right down to it, is whether electricity pricing should reward people who reduce their reliance on the grid, like solar and battery owners, or whether everyone should pay more of the network cost simply for being connected. Now, you may not agree with all of Gavin's conclusions. I'm not so sure I do. But he does underline something really important, that fairness and equity must be part of this conversation as Australia moves to a cleaner energy system. And we'll see how the AEMC's final review on pricing comes down on that question later this year. Thanks for listening to Switched on Australia. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend or leaving a review. It really helps others find the podcast. I'm Anne Delaney. See you next time.